Yeah. Not mandated, but it's very helpful for the 2NC on non-status related questions, i.e. not conditionality, dispositionality, or unconditionality. This particular counterplan is bad. Changes the game when the 2NC reads a card that says, states is the most important question for education policy. Now you have a card that's steeped in the literature that says this is a good test of the USFG. This is an important question that the neg should be able to utilize, rather than just theoretically saying, you know, it is good for neg ground or whatever. You have a piece of evidence that clarifies. This is very good for the 2NC on non-status related theory objections. One AR. What's going on here? How much time do you think you should invest?
It depends on your strategy. If you don't think that there is a lot of other places you can win the debate, theory should probably take up a greater chunk of your 1AR. If you think that the theory argument isn't super important, but you still want to get a time trade-off for the rebuttals, like a 30-40 second extension.
Now, I'm going to keep giving you times for all of these. You know, don't blame me if this doesn't work out sometime because these are roundabout, but I'm going to say 45-second max. And this is, you know, you've really taken the time, and this is an option for the 2AR. But not so much that it trades off because the 1AR is time pressed and has to answer a very large block. You've got other things to do. So, you know, you don't just haphazardly extend theory arguments. You make an active choice that, based off the block, you thought that was mishandled, or you're getting hosed so badly on the substance that this is necessary. This is kind of your time investment. How many should you extend in the 1AR? Anybody have a differing opinion? Correct, 1. You may have put 2 or 3 out there in the 2AC, and then you've evaluated the block's response and thought about, you know, going in beforehand what your strongest argument was, and you picked 1 to extend in, because just like you're going to have to pick which solvency deficit out of the 3 you made that you want to invest and read more cards on, blah, 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 then you've got a net benefit you have to respond to. The 1AR is tough enough as it is. You get 1 that you think either is a reason to reject the argument or the team. How do you extend in this speech? We just read our shell in the 2AC. The 2NC just read their shell. Now what? What does this look like?
You prioritize extending your offense, probably answering their defensive claims to your offense, and probably making a few defensive arguments.
Exactly. So we already talked about this. We already know going in beforehand. Our offense is a fairness-based claim. Pick what your strongest internal link is. Is it unpredictable because it's a process counterplan and there are so many actors that they could possibly choose from, and that's what you think your strongest argument was, or it's what the 2NC botched? Okay, that's your best internal link. When you do a 2NC or 1AR DA impact overview, what does that say? What happens in that impact overview?
You extend your offense and make turns arguments.
You say, the DA outweighs and turns the case because. Fairness outweighs and turns education because. You have an impact overview. You've already assessed what your strongest offense is. You know what your terminal impact is before the debate because it's kind of what you're saddled with. You picked from the 2 or 3, maybe you said in the 2AC, what your best internal link to that is. And then, after we've done that, just like you said, then you play defense to what you think the neg's best offense is. And then you have a couple of defensive responses, and then that rounds out about that amount of time. And then you've given the 2AR something to do. If you just reread a shortened version of the 2AC block, or a little bit more, and you do no responsiveness to the neg, that's not something you've given the 2AR as the ability to extend, and then there's no point. Because the whole point of this is to give the 2AR the ability to spend the whole time of the 2AR on this argument. So you have to set them up for that. So you can't be dropping important pieces of neg offense And you need to have a crucial point of AFOF, and so they can spend a lot of time that says, who cares if the neg one that's really big education important, because fairness is the most important impact in debate and outweighs and turns education. 2 and R. How much time?
Probably about a minute.
I'm going to say a minute to a minute 30. Because you have to think, you botch this, debate's over, right? The 2AR, this is the max amount of time you're going to devote. The 2AR can devote the full 5 minutes. It's a lot of time to develop stuff. It's a lot of time to pick through your stuff. So you want to make sure, because you have to preempt a possible 2AR. You still have to go and win the rest of the debate on substance. Much less make sure you don't lose it on theory. So you need, same thing, you have an impact overview. Education is the most important impact in debate. Our internal link to education is topic focused, topic literature, and we have, we read this card that said the state's counterplan is the best thing in the world, and there's so much of the literature that leans towards this discussion of states versus the federal government. And then you play defense to their fairness impacts. And then the other thing you have to do is pick apart the blippiness of the 1AR. Likely there is going to be some translation difference between a 5-minute 2AR on conditionality bad and a 45-second 1AR, right? So you need to make sure you say no new arguments in the 2AR. Write this down. This has to be said in this, and when you're doing this, you have to say that 1AR was really blippy here and they cannot expand, to an all-out 2AR on this argument. Right? Do not allow, protect the 2NR. Do not allow lots of new extrapolation. Two AR, all in? Or is it part of your overall strategy still answering the counterplan with solvency deficits and still having responses to the net benefit?
It's
All in or no? This is where you have that choice period with your partner of, was those 45 seconds enough? Did they only spend 30 seconds in response and blow it off? Okay. But you're likely not going to have time to totally invest in winning the conditionality argument or whatever and beating back the DA and the counterplan. So you kind of, this is a point where you have to pick. All right. Now that we have that general stuff, we'll talk about actual theory arguments. Fiat, should the neg have it? No? No one believes the neg should have counterplans?
I think it should.
Why?
Because it's a way to press the affirmative without having to defend the status quo.
Does anyone won on this argument and thinks it's a good argument? No neg fiat?
I'm sure
I'll take silence as a yes. I mean, is that... No. This is completely antiquated, and is absent luck of being dropped, is most likely not something you should even introduce. But I'm going to talk about it for the sake of people may, and you have to respond to it. Just like you're kind of, this presupposes no counterplans for the negative, no supposedly fiated alternatives in any capacity. Sometimes the status quo is a rough place, and you don't want to have to defend it. It's not so hot in education policy, as I'm sure you've learned through a topic lecture and just general knowledge. It is much better, and sometimes the status quo may be just rough in education policy, period, but it's also rough for neg DA uniqueness, because something the president's doing. That you need a counterplan to generate uniqueness for a disad, or you need a counterplan to compete against the status quo and also attempt to make some improvement in education policy that maybe is incentive-based rather than regulation-based. This should not be very hard to beat. This is not something you should be trying to introduce, but it's something you need to know, that if you have the capacity to defend any counterplan or the neg being able to do something other than the status quo, that is your response here. So it's important for neg ground for a couple of reasons that I mentioned. This creates an extremely large AF bias if the neg did not have a right to these. And it also allows for the search for the best policy option, which presumably is what we should be doing here in policy debate. Right? It allows some competition versus the AF rather than just saying maybe it's a little bit worse than the status quo that already sucks. Any questions about that before I move on? All right, status theory. What makes status theory unique? Or what is status theory? Let's just start with that. Yeah, it's the conditions under which a neg position can be kicked, right? And there are different interpretations of when that can be done and how it can be done. But what makes it different, status theory, from non-status theory, from picks bad, states counterplan bad? Anybody? Do you think these arguments are a reason to reject the team or the argument? Anybody have any reason why?
Already skewed all of app strategy. I can't come back.
Yeah. These are reasons to reject the team. This is the truth of that answer, no matter what your opponents will tell you what they think the state's counterplan is so bad for. This versus other theory arguments that we'll discuss are reasons to reject the team. You win one of these, the debate's over. You win one of the other theory arguments, the counterplan goes away. Conditionality. Where does it say the conditions of the counterplan can be kicked? Anytime. What is the difference between when you ask someone what is the status and they say the status quo is always a logical option and conditional?
Conditional just means they can kick an advocacy.
Mm-hmm.
Status quo just means we think the app plan is bad.
You ever heard the phrase judge kick? What's it mean?
Usually on counterplans, like in the 2&R, they're like, when on the counterplan, you can be like judge kick. If you don't want to evaluate the counterplan, you can just evaluate the DA versus case or the impact term on the case.
Conditionality, kick it. Status quo is always a logical option, means if you're extending a counterplan in the 2&R and the AF wins a perm, so the counterplan is not competitive, or the AF just really wins, it doesn't solve, the judge could get rid of it for you and evaluate the status quo, i.e. the DA versus the case. Why might this be not so good?
For theoretical reasons?
Yeah. If they allow the judge to just kick their argument after you've beaten it.
Because it means that it skews the 2AR.
Yeah, the 2AR has to both beat the counterplan and then assume the judge gets rid of it and then win that debate too, versus the DA and the status quo. So that's why I'm letting you know, be mindful when your opponent suggests that the status quo is always a logical option versus the counterplan is conditional. Because that tends to hint at judge kick, and then you want to make sure you say, hey, that's kind of bad, and most people will recognize that that's a hard world for the 2AR to have to deal with.
If there's not a condo argument in the 1AR and they make a judge kick claim in the 2&R, can you still make a theoretical reason to reject that argument in the 2&R?
Probably not, no, because you forfeited that battle early on. You might try and get lucky, but no, that is the inherent problem with that, is it is connected to an initial problem with them being able to get rid of the counterplan. If you've not forwarded that argument, then you kind of forfeited your right to complain. So conditionality. What are some reasons it's bad?
Super shifty for like neg strategy, so has no predictability.
Yeah, it's unpredictable. This often in debate they use the phrase moving target, right? You in your 2AC you had a fixed amount of time and you budgeted your answers elsewhere, and then boom, 2 minutes disappears, another 2 minutes disappears because 2 counterplans just went away. And then now the only, the minute and whatever you had on the DA could have been a lot more. What was the argument I was just making? Yeah, time and strategy skew are the other big AF response to conditionality. Right, when the 2AC sees the 1NC fully composed and they start deciding how they're going to respond to things, but that decision becomes a lot more difficult when those arguments can start disappearing later in the block. And then that's a fixed amount of time they have to respond that they would have been able to invest more on the arguments that the block actually did, in fact, extend. What are some reasons that conditionality is a good thing?
Policymaker, like real life policymaking, some teams will make the argument that sometimes like Congress people have to find holes in certain portions of bills, and they have to get rid of portions of bills because of those reasons.
Yeah, they kind of, the idea got put out there, realized it was bad, and we moved on. When they say, the AF, that it was hard to, we couldn't read our best answers to your DA because you read 2 counterplans, what's our response to that? Well, what do you mean?
That like you have to allocate your budget your time correctly and like have the best answers you can in the shortest amount of time possible. It promotes better strategic.
Yeah, actually, we make you use your best answers. Because instead of reading 16 answers to the DA that 8 of them are terrible, you read the 8 ones you thought would actually be useful in the debate. What about time and strategy skew? What would we say to that if we were neg? Why? What?
People are always going to spend time on things that they think are important, and you're never going to be able to exactly guess what the block was, and even if you could, that'd probably be bad.
Right, there are various disparities of, we could have read 10 DAs and still would have been a pretty rough 2AC. Maybe you're faster than your opponent, and there are other structural disparities that make skew is going to happen anyway. Dispositionality. What conditions does this establish a counterplan can be kicked? Anything else? Yep. Now, granted, this is a vague concept that you want your opponent to clarify. Just because they have said this word, do not assume you've understood that this means offense and permutations. Make sure you ask that follow-up when they say dispo. And what do you mean by that? Under what conditions? Because dispositionality gives the 2AC more flexibility, which is what the neg would like to say, because the 2AC can choose to stick them with the counterplan by not making a permutation or not making offensive arguments or making them get rid of it by doing either of those things. So it gives the 2AC more choice and more ability in that 2AC to control what happens. But it's something you want to make sure because there is a great deal of vagueness about what that actually means. Unconditional. Never get rid of it. You have found really good cards. You think it resolves the AF, and you don't want to have to deal with any theory arguments. Game over. We're not going to talk about the merits of that. Which one should you advocate 100% of the time? Try again. Yeah. There's no sense in messing around and trying to be cute and saying your counterplan is dispositional and not knowing what that means before the debate and then losing because the AF did. Be conditional. It's not a big deal. Deal with the theory debate. It's going to happen and it's good practice. Types of counterplans. These are all reasons to reject the argument. Can anyone give me some types of counterplans? Process. agent. Yep.
Object. Yeah.
We're not going to have any theoretical problems with this, but it is a counterplan that exists. We're not going to say topical counterplan's bad. Anything else anybody can think of? What about, yep, picks? 2 and C counterplans. And the last one we'll do uniqueness counterplans. Uniqueness counterplan, what is it?
Like, you want to read a politics dissent, but they're doing something super important, you can be like, counterplan, pass that bill. There's uniqueness for the dissent.
If your DA is in rough shape because politics is often the situation, but maybe it's Trump recently did something with education that just like totally screws the neg, and you like have a reason why you need to kind of rig it in favor of the neg having uniqueness. That's what these are for. Why might they be bad?
Artificially create debate doesn't exist.
Yeah, it is not steeped in what is happening in current events or where the literature is going. You've just rigged that trend line in favor of the neg, which is presumably the AF's response, because that's actually what's going on. So the AF cut new uniqueness cards that said no DA because Trump just did this. Neg needs to figure out what to do after that. Why might it be good?
Because, I don't know, we're all, like, the type reasons, we're always worried about what's going on. I guess in that scenario, if they're worried about politics or whatever, that isn't really substantive debate.
You got to be neg 50% of the time if the topic just Trump does something that just absolutely hoses the neg's ability to generate uniqueness for DAs. Then there is a situation, a dynamic that is created that suggests for the purposes of neg ground, because the status quo was crappy to begin with, and then now this situation happened that thumb solved the DAs, that's the purpose of the counterplan for purposes of neg ground, and that we actually have the ability to do it. This AF team has to be neg too. 2 and C counterplan, what's the purpose of that?
It's usually for like impact defense purposes. Like, for example, if they were to read a piece of evidence, it's like this impact doesn't happen because the cybersecurity industry has enough money to be able to stop it. You could be like, counterplan, defund the cybersecurity industry. There's not any impact fee.
I guess, but no, not really. Anybody else think of a purpose of these? 2AC add-ons. And often these are uniqueness counterplans because you waited to see if the 2AC cut these new Trump cards, and if they didn't have them, then it didn't matter. But since they did, now you're like, okay, Trump's actually gonna, defund the new education program that he created that is similar to the affirmative. So those are often not initially brought up in the 1 and C uniqueness counterplans. They're a response because the 2AC made this damaging argument. So they're in response to add-ons and to our general uniqueness counterplans that address something the 2AC did. Why might these be not so great? Yeah, this theory argument is being introduced in the 1AR. It's a bit late breaking. Most people are not going to accept this as a good thing. But if you don't put up a fight, then you've probably lost a strong 2AC argument or an add-on, and it structurally changed the debate. Most people are going to, you've already have to suck up some of your 1AR time on making this argument. This is general consensus, not a great thing, but you've got to establish that it is not a great thing. Why might it be good?
Because the 2 and C is still constructive.
Mm-hmm.
They have to be prepared for new arguments.
Exactly. And just the same things we said for uniqueness counterplans. You probably had I mean, some people do this haphazardly, and you might have done it to see if you get away with it, but generally it's probably for a strong reason, right? Because this 2AC argument is so, uniqueness trend is so damaging that for the neg, to get back to ground zero should probably establish that Trump didn't do something that is directly in line with the topic. Let's do consult counter plans. What about these? What's an example of one of these? Consult what? Japan. Yeah, sure. Japan, NATO, whatever. Right? It consults some other actor about the plan. Has some cards that say they'll say yes to that. Then does the plan, and then has an internal net benefit based off who they consulted. Likely relations based. Why is that not so great?
There's a million people for things you can consult.
It is super unpredictable. Yeah. Lots of actors in the world. Probably not tangential to education. What does it also do with the AF? All of it. It does the plan verbatim, so there's not a credible solvency deficit. Obviously, you have say no, but it doesn't do some alternative action that you can say is ineffective. It steals the AF that you would normally be able to use as offense. Why is it maybe okay?
Because I think one argument you can make is that, like, we have to have good solvency cards. And though there's not like an infinite number of options. There's only maybe like 3 or 4 for consult counter plans, and that should be predictable.
Hopefully, this argument is actually tangential to education. Maybe you consulted the Department of Education or some international organization or actor that gives money for education purposes. That's when, remember we talked, you need EV in the 2NC? All of these you need EV. Or it's going to be near impossible. What's the general consensus on consult? Good or bad? Bad. General consensus, not the greatest thing. Odds dramatically improve if it is relevant. Like this is an actual actor that normal means would assess their opinion as relevant. Odds dramatically improve. But general consensus, not so great. Conditions counterplan. What does this do? What's an example?
Say the app's great as long as we also do this thing.
Yeah, do the plan if and only if we give a bunch of money for food security internationally. Food security is good, plan doesn't solve it. That's obviously an extreme example. Like I said, these are red and generally good when they are tangential to education policy. But same thing, does the plan, under some condition, has an internal net benefit based off that condition. Honestly, pretty much good and bad for the exact same reasons. Lots of conditions in the world. Neg? Well, probably good if we've got a bunch of cards that say this condition is normally done. For the last 20 years, they've done this type of condition for bills on education policy. So it's steeped in the topic literature. You're going to see the same AF and neg response to basically all of these. And the solution will center around the neg being able to have some cards that say normal means is done by this, or here's an important route. The AF will say it's unpredictable and steals the AF. Process counterplans. Also inclusive of agent counterplans. Do these do the whole plan? Yeah. Usually it's some other actor that does the exact same mandate of the plan. Whether, maybe that AF was agnostic about who did it and just said USFG, so then it clarified and said the courts or the executive or whatever, or the states. Why are process counterplans not so hot? Steal the AF. Lots of agents. Not so predictable. Neg. We got some cards. It is predictable. It is in the topic literature. People have been talking about this. This is an important question that is posed. Courts versus Congress, courts versus the executive, states versus the federal government. All those are relevant questions in the literature. That's kind of how you get back in, the door. This is an important test of it, a part of the plan, i.e. the USFG or the US. International actor counterplans. The UN should do the plan.
International. Are we talking about like app answers?
Bad or good?
It'd be bad because like international fiat's abusive. You shouldn't be.
But why is it abusive?
You shouldn't be allowed to fiat more than the United States federal government because you could fiat any other country doing it.
Same damn thing. It's unpredictable. Tons of actors. Neg, same response. Test the USFG part of the plan. We've got Ev that says the UN is normally, a relevant question in U.S. education policy, or they just, this is kind of on their docket, this is on their agenda, it's stuff they do, and they're good at it, and they're better at it than the actor of the plan. Picks. What's a pick? What's an example? What does that do?
Just like, it'd be like the track to counterplan last year's topic. It's just your plan text, but like something slightly different about it, like a different actor, or different mechanism.
So say the plan gives money to all, what does the topic say, secondary education and elementary, or whatever the hell the word is. They do all of that except for religious schools. Plan said all, Neg did slightly less, and has an internal net benefit that, religious schools produce bad people or something, I don't know. Solves all the AF. You have no advantage of benefiting the economy or whatever that's based solely off religious schools. So why would the AF say it's bad?
You can just get rid of any small portion of the plan and gain an advantage off of it.
Yeah, they get an artificial net benefit. Like, they could win. Religious people are net worse than atheists. Like, the net benefit is irrelevant. It's got, it needs to be 0.0001% of something because it does the whole AF. So it steals the affirmative. Sometimes it's super unpredictable. Maybe it's a word pick. Maybe there's something in the topic that some people said they do not like the terminology of. So it does the whole plan and changes the word. What's the continual neg response? Yeah, we got cards that say religious schools are factored in every broad mandate for education policy. So it's something you better be prepared to defend. Just because you wrote your plan vaguely is not our problem. We did our research in the topic literature that says there are a lot of advocates that say these people or these schools should be excluded from any increase in federal funding. So all these non-status things are generally resolved by cards. Yeah, you've got your, theoretical responses. I'm not saying you just read a card that says religious schools are important and move on. You've still got your defense to their problems, that this is in fact predictable because of the literature. It doesn't steal the app because it fundamentally does have an important difference that you should be prepared to defend, etc. But it makes your life a lot easier. Lastly, object fiat. One of you all brought that up, so what do you think's an example?
It's like fiating an actual object that doesn't take an action, or fiating the object of the resolution.
Last year's topic was China. You got a China war impact. Maybe the impact of is really good for that right now. A lot of cards say it's on the brink. So the neg is like, we're not going to be able to win, that outweighs the DA. Counterplan, China will not go to war with the U.S. Or vice versa, because you can only control the U.S., whatever. Why is that? Maybe not so good. Yeah, you don't got Ev to support this claim. You've just fiated away an AF impact. Again, general consensus, not a good thing. But these are things you all need to be familiar with, because when you approach them, you need to be able to shut them down. All right, effective deployment of any of these. Let's see if this works. Impact comparison. Debate it like a DA. We just talked about this briefly a little bit earlier. When you're entering the final rebuttals on any of these arguments, education outweighs and turns fairness. Fairness outweighs and turns education. Our strongest internal link is unpredictability. Our strongest internal link is depth of education. Just like a DA, you say DA outweighs and turns the case. Same thing, impact overview. Even if statements. In some of these sections of time, 45 seconds, a minute 30, you do not have time to address every single AF or neg arg. You picked what your best source of offense was, and you tried to play some D to theirs. So that's why we have this, because even if they win their whole internal linked education, we have no battle to, this is kind of not steeped in the topic. We read consult NATO. We have no contestation of that. But our other internal link, or our terminal impact, is so much stronger, it doesn't matter. So even if they win X, we win the debate because. Examples. A lot of this whole thing has been highly abstract. And this debate is. The way you concretize it and make it make sense to a judge is you offer examples or scenarios. Preferably ones that actually happened in the debate that you thought were really bad. All right, if conditionality was uniquely bad, because we didn't really talk about this, and this maybe talked about in some other lecture, but it is like a K and a counterplan and is a performative contradiction. There is a unique scenario of abuse, you think, other than just normal conditionality. You offer, if you're saying this pick of religious schools is bad, you offer other examples. Picking out of, special education classes or something that's extremely small, you want to offer continual examples of other counterplans that because they picked out of religious schools, that they justify. These are examples. It's just like topicality. Making a case list. You're saying they explode limits, and here are like the 20 terrible, stupid cases that would be allowed under the world of the topic. Here are all the horrible things that would be allowed under their interpretation of picks being allowed or of conditionality being allowed, etc. Specific is always going to be better than general. Inter. The interpretation is super important. For example, you could say only performative contradictions are bad, but conditionality in general is good. Neg says condo good. Why does the AF win that debate? They agreed conditionality was good. They only said it gets bad when it is performative contradiction between a K and a counterplan. For example, the AF may say conditionality is good, but you only get one. Neg ran 3. It's much easier for the AF. Solves a lot of the neg's offense of generally conditionality is good. You want limiting interpretations. Often there are permutations and combinations, i.e. conditional picks are bad. That argument suggests or implies that a pick where conditionality on its own may be okay, but when those two concepts are combined, it is uniquely bad. A lot of AFs, when they read conditionality bad, say the neg should have been dispositional. That would have given us more flexibility. We could have controlled our 2AC strategy. So rather than just having to defend the concept of all conditionality is bad, that gives you the ability to solve neg offense. And same thing for the neg. As the negative, you should only be responsible for defending what you did. So say the AF says conditionality writ large is horrible, and they use the example, it could have been infinitely aggressive. You could have ran 10 counterplans and kicked all of them, but you only ran one. So your counterinterp there will be one conditional counterplan is good because. That solves AF offense. And when they say infinitely aggressive, you say no, it was only one. And logic dictates that we can always revert back to the status quo. So the interp is super important and can control these debates a lot, because if you have a combination or an interp that you think solves some of their offense and they just read a generic conditionality bad block but drop dispositionality solves, debate's over. It's basically dropping counterplan solves case. Because then only you have external offense. And any reason they say conditionality is good is solved by your interp. Any reason picks are generically okay, you've agreed with, but when they're conditional, then they're uniquely bad. Lastly, write your own. Do not have some pre-downloaded camp file or whatever, because these are abstract and someone else's verbiage may not make sense to you, someone else's examples you may not be familiar with. An often used reason for why picks are bad is the penny less counterplan. Do the plan minus a penny. E-card net benefit. But if that's not something you're historically familiar with in debate and you're reading this block and you have no clue what it means, it is not useful to you. So you, at some point in time, it'd be helpful if lab or something, you'll have many debates over these things of going for condo good and bad, and later that you've written a block yourself, the shell, and extensions. So you pick what you think is the strongest reason for why conditionality is bad, and you'll be the best advocate of it later in that impact overview. Y'all should be typing out reasons why you think fairness outweighs and turns education. How long am I supposed to go to?
I would say 40.
Okay. We can do that. Fairness versus education. Can anybody think of any arguments to prefer one over the other? It can be defense.
Fairness is the only way to funnel education.
Why?
Because without fair debates, you can't access good forms of education. Because there's always going to be skewed, so you don't actually get any educational benefit.
Okay. I wouldn't say always skew. Why would I not say always? Debate is always potentially skewed.
Or can't be.
Because that would be defense.
Yeah.
That the education advocate would say, yeah, but unfairness is inevitable. Faster people, multiple positions, etc., etc. That is a defensive argument I would make when I'm going for education. Fairness is the key internal link to education because, if the AF is taken or if there are multiple positions and we couldn't test things in depth, then we don't have a depth of education over a subject if the debate was rigged in someone's favor. How can we say the debate was truly educational if the debate was rigged to where the AF couldn't read offense, didn't get to discuss the affirmative? Anybody else? Any reasons why either of these might be a stronger impact than the other, or defense if someone's going for one of these? We already have, if they say fairness, we're going to say unfairness is inevitable in debate for a number of reasons.
Education's the reason you do debate.
Yeah, it's the whole damn point. Y'all ever heard portable skills? So what if in this one debate an AF got stolen? You do this activity for 4 years So when you go to college or you want to go to law school, etc., you have some critical thinking abilities, you have etc. And this is the ultimate point. This lasts for a debate. This lasts for a lifetime. This is actually transportable. This is, an insular concept that is not all that relevant outside of that one debate.
Debates aren't fair, then people aren't going to want to debate, and so then they don't get involved, and then all the political skills aren't applied.
Not a super strong impact, but it is one that people say people are going to quit if if this ends up being skewed and the neg is, for example, say we commonly accept that all of those types of counterplanes are probably okay, the AF is just going to get rolled. If the AF can never make theoretical objections, and if debate is 70% neg wins, maybe people are not so excited to stay around. And then who's there to learn these skills? Anybody think of anything else? Think of it, this is a DA, you're going for an impact overview of either one of these outways and turns.
Education is probably more important for fairness, more than portable skills, because even though debates can be unfair, we can learn more about the topic through these kinds of counterplans. So like topic education.
Yeah, that's more of an internal link, or maybe just like further description of this concept, and you do want those to be in depth. What about defense? So we've established that we have some defense to the fairness claim. We have no defense to all the knowledge in the world being a good thing.
Debaters are half and neg, so any offense on one side is negated round to round.
That's true, but it kind of nullifies the whole damn thing, much less as being defense to education. But I get your point. The scale should, not steep down one way, but it doesn't really help you necessarily. Maybe more if you're neg, I guess, and you're just like, we shouldn't lose on theory kind of thing. You're just like, come on. But it does not really help you out in this sort of like impact calc. I'll just go and interject with one thing I had not mentioned that will revive from topicality. That's kind of important on the interp stuff. Reasonability competing interps. Hypothetically, neg reads T. What's the AF going to want to say? Right. How could the neg utilize that later in the debate? Under the assumption that T is not being extended. Same thing. Cross apply. T is running the 1 in C. 2AC says reasonability. We know we don't want to go for a T. So we're going to use that to help us on theory is defer to reasonability. Same thing. We were talking earlier, if we're going really hard on interp solves offense, we're going to want to establish a competing interps frame, because it can also be argued that interps are arbitrary. I would write this down because if someone told me their interp was so much better, I'd probably say establishing interps on theory is arbitrary. Why?
They're not like an actual ruling, like at the end of the day.
No, think of it more as like a no potential abuse thing on T. Like, why should you only be responsible for what you did versus the worst form of that thing?
Because like you don't make a norm in debate.
Right. What you're saying here is that, they say under a perfect world you're dispositional, or under a perfect world you read this number of positions or whatever, but you only did X. Right? You should only be responsible for what you did. So maybe the whole concept of establishing an alternative world that would have solved all of your offense had you done this is not the greatest of things.
Wait, so if you like say that like interps are arbitrary, do you like just say like judge only vote on like in-round reviews?
Essentially, but what you're trying to check in that circumstance is the hypothetical world where you were dispositional that solves all of your offense. Obviously, you still want to say dispositionality is the same as condo, or it's got its own whole set of problems, so it doesn't solve our offense. Make sure you answer interps. But also, to hedge your bets, it should just be condo good bad. Not some alternative world of what didn't occur that would be better. We should just be having a debate over that initial theory question. So we should not lose the debate because conditionality is only good when there's a certain number of them, or what we did was okay, but dispositionality would be slightly better, which is why competing interps are not the greatest thing, as an egg team might say. Did you say to 40?
Yeah.
Okay. I think I'm done here. Thank you all for having me and talking about theory. I know it's not the most fun thing in the world.
Thank you.
No problem.
Hey, can I ask you a question?
Yeah, sure.
Can you re-explain why like reasonability and like competing interpretation is like significant again?
So,
And you all can go lunch if you need to,
Yeah,
because they have like pictures at 1:15. So
I think I'll be here tomorrow with y'all too, for the framework.
yeah.
So, for example, when you're saying condo bad, you might also say, after you said the reasons condo is bad, that if the neg were dispo, it'd be better. Or if they read 3 conditional counterplans, if they only read 1 of them, it would be better. So the AF would establish interp that they think would solve their offense. So the neg might say, we shouldn't have to debate that. We should only have to debate what we did, which is conditionality, and that's good. Rather than the alternative world where we read less conditional positions would be slightly better, or the alternative world where the counterplan status was dispositional, that would be slightly better. That's why competing interps and interpretations might be arbitrary. For reasonability, another thing the neg could do is if they read topicality, and the 2AC in their answer to topicality said reasonability was good, and the neg was not going to extend topicality, then they could cross-apply that and say reasonability should be used on theory as well, and you should not reject us.
Oh.
Because just like the app is, it's not that bad what we did, we're reasonably topical. Neg, it's not that bad what we did, it shouldn't be a reason to reject us.
So you're pretty much let's say like the negative team read a topicality, but then like they didn't like go